This is just a sample of the audiobook. To get the complete audiobook, access the link posted in the first comment.
And on the wall between the woodshed and the kitchen window hangs the meat safe, just above the place where the sink discharges its greasy streams. The cook sweeps all the refuse out through a little door into the Rue Neuve-Sainte-Geneviève, and frequently cleanses the yard with copious supplies of water, under pain of pestilence. The house might have been built on purpose for its present uses. Access is given by a French window to the first room on the ground floor, a sitting room which looks out upon the street through the 2 barred windows already mentioned. Another door opens out of it into the dining room, which is separated from the kitchen by the well of the staircase, the steps being constructed partly of wood, partly of tiles, which are colored and beeswaxed. Nothing can be more depressing than the sight of that sitting room. The furniture is covered with horsehair, woven in alternate dull and glossy stripes. There is a round table in the middle with a purplish-red marble top, on which there stands, by way of ornament, the inevitable white china tea-service, covered with a half-effaced gilt network. The floor is sufficiently uneven. The wainscot rises to elbow height, and the rest of the wall space is decorated with a varnished paper on which the principal scenes from Télémaque are depicted, the various classical personages being colored. The subject between the 2 windows is the banquet given by Calypso to the son of Ulysses, displayed thereon for the admiration of the boarders, and has furnished jokes these 40 years to the young men who show themselves superior to their position by making fun of the dinners to which poverty condemns them. The hearth is always so clean and neat that it is evident that a fire is only kindled there on great occasions. The stone chimney-piece is adorned by a couple of vases filled with faded artificial flowers imprisoned under glass shades on either side of a bluish marble clock in the very worst taste. The first room exhales an odor for which there is no name in the language, and which should be called the odeur de pension. The damp atmosphere sends a chill through you as you breathe it. It has a stuffy, musty, and rancid quality. It permeates your clothing. After-dinner scents seem to be mingled in it with smells from the kitchen and scullery and the reek of a hospital. It might be possible to describe it if someone should discover a process by which to distill from the atmosphere all the nauseating elements with which it is charged by the catarrhal exhalations of every individual lodger, young or old. Yet in spite of these stale horrors, the sitting-room is as charming and as delicately perfumed as a boudoir, when compared with the adjoining dining-room. The paneled walls of that apartment were once painted some color, now a matter of conjecture, for the surface is encrusted with accumulated layers of grimy deposit, which cover it with fantastic outlines. A collection of dim-ribbed glass decanters, metal discs with a satin sheen on them, and piles of blue-edged earthenware plates of terrain-ware cover the sticky surfaces of the sideboards that line the room. In a corner stands a box containing a set of numbered pigeonholes in which the largest table napkins, more or less soiled and stained with wine, are kept. Here you see that indestructible furniture never met with elsewhere, which finds its way into lodging-houses, such as the wrecks of our civilization drift into hospitals for incurables. You expect in such places as these to find the weather-house, whence a capuchin issues on wet days. You look to find the execrable engravings which spoil your appetite, framed every one in a black varnished frame, with a gilt beading round it. You know the sort of tortoise-shell clock case inlaid with brass, the green stove, the argand lamps, covered with oil and dust, have met your eyes before. The oilcloth which covers the long table is so greasy that a waggish externe will write his name on the surface, using his thumbnail as a style. The chairs are broken-down invalids. The wretched little hempen mats slip away from under your feet without slipping away for good, and finally the foot-warmers are miserable wrecks, hingeless, charred, broken away about the holes. It would be impossible to give an idea of the old, rotten, shaky, cranky, worm-eaten, halt, maimed, one-eyed, rickety, and ramshackle condition of the furniture without an exhaustive description, which would delay the progress of the story to an extent that impatient people would not pardon. The red tiles of the floor are full of depressions brought about by scouring and periodical renewings of color. In short, there is no illusory grace left to the poverty that reigns here. It is dire, parsimonious, concentrated, threadbare poverty. As yet, it has not sunk into the mire. It is only splashed by it, and though not in rags as yet, its clothing is ready to drop to pieces. This apartment is in all its glory at 7 o'clock in the morning, when Madame Vauquet's cat appears, announcing the near approach of his mistress, and jumps upon the sideboards to sniff at the milk in the bowls, each protected by a plate, while he purrs his morning greeting to the world. A moment later, the widow shows her face. She is tricked out in a net cap attached to a false front set on awry, and shuffles into the room in her slipshod fashion. She is an oldish woman, with a bloated countenance and a nose like a parrot's beak, set in the middle of it. Her fat little hands, she is as sleek as a church rat, and her shapeless, slouching figure, are in keeping with the room that reeks of misfortune, where hope is reduced to speculate for the meanest stakes. Madame Vauquet alone can breathe that tainted air without being disheartened by it. Her face is as fresh as a frosty morning in autumn. There are wrinkles about the eyes that vary in their expression from the set smile of a ballet dancer to the dark, suspicious scowl of a discounter of bills. In short, she is at once the embodiment and interpretation of her lodging-house, as surely as her lodging-house implies the existence of its mistress. You can no more imagine the one without the other than you can think of a jail without a turnkey. The unwholesome corpulence of the little woman is produced by the life she leads, just as typhus fever is bred in the tainted air of a hospital. The very knitted woolen petticoat that she wears beneath a skirt made of an old gown, with the wadding protruding through the rents in the material, is a sort of epitome of the sitting-room, the dining-room, and the little garden. It discovers the cook. It foreshadows the lodgers. The picture of the house is completed by the portrait of its mistress. Madame Vauquet, at the age of 50, is like all women who have seen a deal of trouble. She has the glassy eyes and innocent air of a trafficker in flesh and blood, who will wax virtuously indignant to obtain a higher price for her services, but who is quite ready to betray a Georges or a Pichegru, if a Georges or a Pichegru were in hiding and still to be betrayed, or for any other expedient that may alleviate her lot. Still, she is a good woman at bottom, said the lodgers, who believed that the widow was wholly dependent upon the money that they paid her, and sympathized when they heard her cough and groan like one of themselves. What had Monsieur Vauquet been? The lady was never very explicit on this head. How had she lost her money? Through trouble, was her answer. He had treated her badly, had left her nothing but her eyes to cry over his cruelty. The house she lived in, and the privilege of pitying nobody, because so she was wont to say, she herself had been through every possible misfortune. Sylvie, the stout cook, hearing her mistress' shuffling footsteps, hastened to serve the lodgers' breakfasts. Beside those who lived in the house, Madame Vauquet took boarders who came for their meals. But these externes usually only came to dinner, for which they paid 30 francs a month. At the time when this story begins, the lodging-house contained 7 inmates.